Okay, great. So Save Our Schools Arizona is a nonprofit 501c3 and 501c4 here in Arizona that started as a grassroots group of 6 moms who came together in 2017 to stop the first Universal Voucher Expansion. And they have now grown to include thousands of volunteers across the state, of which I am one. And the reason that Save Our Schools is so passionate about this issue is that 95% of Arizona families choose public schools. So when the proponents of school choice are pushing these voucher expansions, that's actually in opposition to what we see happening in reality, where 95% of Arizona families are choosing their local neighborhood schools. And as we know, public schools are good for the economy, they're good for our community, they raise property values, and it is, for me, it's a moral issue. I don't know about Save Our Schools, but for me, it's a moral issue that everyone should have access to high quality public education. So you may know that Arizona is at the bottom of the barrel nationally. We are last in the nation in per student spending and in teacher pay. And the reality is that this is on purpose. This is because of decades of intentional budget cuts and moves to privatize education. If you cut the budget so that the schools aren't able to perform as they're intended. Sorry, Tara, there's folks in the waiting room there. Then the schools are, and you push this narrative that schools are failing, then you come in with the privatization efforts and you are siphoning dollars away from public schools. And that's exactly what's happening here. So the impact really falls on children and families and on our school personnel who are in the midst of a mental health crisis because of all of the things that have happened in the last 2.5 years, because of low wages, all of these things that go along the collateral damage of these funding cuts. So we have the second most crowded class sizes in the US and the highest teacher turnover rate here in Arizona. Our student to counselor ratio is the worst in the nation. Many schools lack nurses and librarians and counselors. Our arts programs go unfunded, and we have a lot of deferred maintenance on buses, ACs, roofs, and classroom materials. And to add to the burden, oops, I'm sorry. So if we look at the general fund, the Arizona's budget, school funding accounts for 44% of that budget, which seems like a lot. But the reality is that our state general fund is far smaller than the general funds of states of comparable sizes, because our state gives away more of our tax dollars in tax cuts and credits to corporations and individuals than it takes into the general fund. So the state is taking in all of these taxes, but rather than all of them going into the general fund, $15 billion of them are given away again in terms of in the form of tax credits and tax cuts. So our small general fund means that 44% of that is just not enough it's just not adequate for school funding. And our funding models are extremely unequal. Because the state funding is so low, schools are forced to shift the burden to local taxpayers in the form of higher property taxes, bonds and overrides, which must pass via, they must pass a vote, a community vote, but it takes thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get those things on the ballot and then to run the campaign to get them passed. And so schools without that extra cash laying around are not able to pass the bonds and overrides. We've seen that over and over again with Sunnyside. They haven't been able to pass their bonds and overrides. Then we have tax credits. You may be familiar with, in April, you can donate your tax credits to a school that you choose. The reality is that families of higher socioeconomic status are able to make those donations because they've got that extra cash running around and sitting around, and so it's okay for them to wait for their refund from the state. In lower socioeconomic schools, families are less able to make those donations, so the school doesn't get that money. We have the most inequitable funding model in the United States. Primarily white, so school districts that are composed of 75% or more white students receive 2 times more per student than high poverty non-white schools because of the issues described in that first bullet point. And these funding cuts continue to hit low income and rural communities the hardest. So that was a little orientation to the funding landscape in Arizona. Let's move into looking specifically at vouchers. So first of all, what are vouchers? They are public taxpayer dollars, so that's our money, used to pay for private school expenses, including religious private schools. So they go by a bunch of different names. The one that we're fighting currently is the Empowerment Scholarship Account. There's also School Tuition Organization, which is, you may have had, be familiar with people who send their tax credits to a private school. That's through the School Tuition Organization voucher. So with these vouchers, many of our tax dollars are going to religious schools. This is how they get around the Arizona Supreme Court ruling that vouchers going to religious schools are unconstitutional. They funnel it through these school tuition organizations. And it also includes these the micro schools and other private academies. I'm going to put one in the chat here for you that is opening up in Phoenix, that is run by Turning Points USA, which is a very, very, very I don't know how to, scary, thank you. I'm not sure how to, I'll let you say that. This is the kind of, our tax dollars are supporting schools like this with these vouchers, which is not in accordance with the purpose of tax dollars. Tax dollars are supposed to be funding public goods, and by diverting them to private schools, we are digging ourselves into a big hole as far as democracy is concerned. So how did this happen? These have not been around all that long. So the first thing that happened was Arizona passing the tax credits for private school tuition. Then in 2006, they passed private school vouchers, but the Arizona Supreme Court deemed that unconstitutional because tax dollars were going directly to religious schools, so violating the separation of church and state. To get around that, Arizona created these ESA vouchers, Empowerment Scholarship Account. And initially they were only for students with special needs who couldn't get the services they needed in public schools. But over the last 10 years, the state has incrementally expanded the eligibility for these ESA vouchers. And this was on purpose, because once these vouchers are out of the gate, it's going to be really hard to say, oh, you don't get this money anymore, to folks who have already been getting this money. So in 2016, they passed expansion to children in foster care, military families on a Native American reservation, and a DNF rated school, with the narrative that we are taking kids out of these failing schools and we're going to help them get into private schools. But we'll see why that's not really what happens. In 2017, the legislature passed the first Universal Voucher Expansion, which was when Save Our Schools started. They gathered signatures to refer that expansion to the ballot, and voters shot it down by a 2-to-1 margin. So voters have made it clear that we don't want these vouchers. We want highly We want high quality public schools that are well funded. So these vouchers have grown exponentially. This is an old slide. So here we're at 292 million. Thank you. It's going to be $2 billion with this new expansion. $2 billion every year of your tax money being given away to go to private schools with no oversight. And when I say no oversight, I mean there's no mechanism in place to make sure that this money is actually spent on educational resources. And we'll talk about the fraud more in a second. So why does this keep growing? It keeps growing because of these incremental bills. So if you follow Save Our Schools, you know that they're constantly putting out action alerts about this bill is in the legislature, this bill, and each one is a little incremental increase of the voucher programs. So I think the strategy is to just exhaust us and overwhelm us with things to fight. So ESA vouchers, empowerment scholarship accounts, are debit cards that are loaded with taxpayer money that is funneled out of public schools and given to parents to spend as they see fit. So the voucher amount is between $5,000 and $30,000 per student, depending on the student, what categories the student falls into. The most recent, prior to this expansion, it was, as we said, students with special needs, students in the military, students on reservations, and students opting out of DNF schools. 80% of ESAs, 80% of those debit cards are worth over $20,000 each. There is no accountability in terms of what that money gets spent on, and there's no accountability in terms of tracking education outcomes from the private schools. And yet they're sold under the guise of competition. But how can we see if, which one is, if public schools or private schools are winning the competition when private schools are not required to track education outcomes in the same way as public schools? There is well-documented fraud and abuse rampant in the ESA voucher program, but because no mechanism exists to track that within the State Department of Education, this has been through journalism. So I'm going to put a couple links in the chat here for you in case you want to look at these later. These are a story from the Arizona Republic and from the New York Times documenting fraud in the voucher program in Arizona. Some fun reading for you. So in that Arizona Central, the Republic article, they found that people using these funds for beauty supplies, for apparel, trying to make cash withdrawals, trying to use it like an ATM card. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's, we have no idea what's really going on because the accountability has specifically been left out on purpose. And when I'm talking with people who might be inclined to believe that school choice is a good thing, and I let them know about the lack of accountability, that is just not a smart financial move, economic move, I've made a lot of headway in those conversations, because regardless of whether you agree about whether schools should be public or private, this is a really poor use of taxpayer funds. So, okay. Other problems with vouchers is that public schools are required by law to take all students with special needs, English learners, students with lower income. And what we've seen is that private academies turn those students away because they don't have the staff to provide English as a second language support. They don't have special education support. They don't have transportation. They don't have after school care. They don't have free and reduced lunches, which means that even though they're advertised as tools to help lower income families access high quality education, the reality is that families that need after school care, need free and reduced lunches, need transportation, need special education or ESL services don't fit with the private school expectations. And the reality is that these private school vouchers are not actually enough to cover the tuition of private schools. So there's what we refer to as the voucher gap, where higher socioeconomic families are able to make up the gap between the tuition and the voucher, whereas lower income families don't have the cash on hand to be able to make up that gap. The majority of students using vouchers are leaving A and B rated public schools. They're not leaving D and F rated public schools because those families can't actually afford the gap. So this talking point about school choice and this is a way to fix our education system, it's not. I am going to put another link in the chat for you here. This is a place where you can find how much your district loses in voucher money every year. And TUSD loses $5 million every year. That's money that is budgeted for them, but then they should be receiving it, but then students from TUSD use the vouchers to leave and go to private schools. That siphons that money, that $5 million a year, away from TUSD. So Arizona voters have made it clear that we don't want vouchers. We want well-funded neighborhood public schools. The school privatization movement is led by a handful of extremely wealthy foundations and the organizations that they support. So some of the big names are the DeVos Family Foundation, the Koch Foundation, the Walton Foundation of Walmart fame, the Bradley Foundation, he's a billionaire, activist, political donor, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, the Goldwater Institute, and many more. So these are out-of-state groups that are pushing this privatization agenda because they want to be able to make money off of education. So the way it works is that these groups like ALEC and the Goldwater Institute draft legislation that they give to state lawmakers to introduce. They give campaign donations. They fund the advertising campaigns to push school choice, and they fund the efforts to block our grassroots opposition to this voucher expansion. This is the fourth summer in 4 years that we are gathering signatures on issues to protect public school funding in Arizona. Every time we succeed, every time they've killed either our referral of a bad law to the ballot or our passage of a new law like the Invest in Education Act. That funding is coming from these out-of-state foundations who are pushing this privatization agenda. Let me give you can learn more about these groups on the Save Our Schools page, which I'm going to put in the chat right here.
Kate, we have a comment in the chat.
Perfect timing.
From Teresa. It says, once that money is siphoned from TUSD, the student may go to a private or charter, but then after the 45th day, if that student gets kicked out, public schools are required by law to accept them with absolutely no funding because the private charter school already received the funding. So
yes,
the funding wouldn't pivot over. Wow. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. And it's an accepted practice. Keep the kid for 45 days, then, oh, you're not a match. Then they go back to the public school. Public school gets $0 for educating that kid. When did AZ start tax credits for public schools? The tax credits first started in 1997. Pamela Powers Handley, who I'm not sure if she ran again this time. She used to be in the state legislature from LD9, has a really, really, really great presentation about tax credits in Arizona. Like I said, we give away more money than we take in, and these tax credits are bonkers. There's a tax credit for private jet fuel. There's a tax credit like 4.5-inch pipe gets a tax credit, 6-inch pipe does not because of whatever lobbying group pushed for it's infuriating. It only takes a simple majority in the legislature to pass. So only takes, 51 votes in the legislature to pass a tax cut or credit, but it takes a 2/3 majority to undo it. So once these things get passed, it's virtually impossible to undo them. Other questions or comments?
I just have another comment. I taught math at Pima Community College for 26 and a half years. And I've been retired for the last 3.5. Prior to that, every semester I would get at least 2 or 3 phone calls from charter schools asking for the names of my best and brightest students, because they would have classrooms that were computerized. So the students would be doing the work on an educational software, but then instead of having a licensed certified teacher, they would hire these college students, freshmen, sophomores, that's what we teach at the college, right? So 16 to 20-year-old students with no educational background as far as teaching, and they would hire these students to be the teacher in the classroom. And that happened, literally 3, 4, 5 times a semester for the last 3 or 4 years that I was teaching, which is very scary.
Yep. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that.
And I think it's part of the issue too is, if you remember, since 2009 or whatever, Gianni Napolitano went to work for Obama. Arizona has been pretty much a supermajority state on the GOP. So, you can do the math. So that's the time that has taken to get to this particular point in terms of strategically defunding public schools, especially you remember also Tom Horn was the superintendent of public education. Now he's back again with this. And I think that's part of the issue, relatively, parallel, if you would, in relation to when it comes to public education. The reason that I'm in this conversation is because my wife for 31 years has been a teacher for 35, and she cannot attend this session, right? Because she's in school right now. So, and I think that's part of the things that we also have, that all of us who are 100% engaged in public education, we are here. However, the people who are in the trenches, or the teachers, cannot attend many, not just this, but also many of the other type of power luncheons in which you have people talking about whatever those situations related to education, because they are actually at school. So I think, and granted, it's not that I'm biased, it's just that I know I've seen the shift that is happening, and also the frustration. And even on the media yesterday, they were doing, again, in some school here in TUSD, a drive to get school supplies. So you have to think about richest nation in the world. Here is in Arizona, where are the lowest at the bottom? And here we're kind of begging for people to get highlighters or school supplies. So I think we need to, this is a great organization. I support 100% Literacy Connects. I do believe that if we put some kind of action plan, it has to be how do we engage more on the trenches, people who are pretty much the ones being affected 100% for that. Because
Absolutely.
believe me, what you just said, Kate, I'm so
yep.
sorry, is that the fact I've known that internally for the last 20 years because of my wife's frustration with policies, school districts, and you name it. And so now she's an AMFI and it's still the same situation. And you can see the difference because of the taxes and also the families and the income versus when she was at Safford Middle School. where also 2
Yeah.
hour status went a few years back. So I think it's very important when you are sharing information, but I think it's more about how do we disseminate that and how do we engage other people who, mostly teachers and others, who are not part of this conversation. Because it's
Yeah.
very powerful when you present it. So we just
Yeah.
need to expand that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for those points. It's absolutely true. I, being involved with Red for Ed these last 4 years, I'm one of the few in my crew of Red for Ed friends who's not a K-12 teacher. And they are, like, at the beginning of the pandemic, my friend who teaches 3rd grade at Monzo Elementary, he had 42 3rd graders in his Zoom. So people are just, they're just, I am so, hats off to our K-12 public educators. They are doing so much with so little. And I think it's really important for those of us who aren't in the classroom to take on a lot of the activism, because they are really just doing their best to keep their heads above water. And the other point you made, Miguel, that was really good was that.
Supermajority.
Oh, yes. So Save Our Schools is nonpartisan because this is not a partisan issue. Good schools that's not a partisan issue. It has become so in Arizona. It has been politicized in Arizona. My grandma, she passed away a few years ago, but lifelong staunch Republican from rural Iowa. And in 2018, when the teacher walkout was happening and I was starting to get active, I was telling her about it. And she said, I don't understand why they wouldn't want good schools. Like, good schools is not a partisan issue. The privatization of schools has become a partisan issue. I had a gentleman call us here at Literacy Connects because he wanted to come in and sign, and we had a nice conversation on the phone, and he said, I'm a Republican, but I just can't take this anymore. This is just not right. Public schools are public schools. Public money should go to public schools. So I think the privatization is pushed as a partisan issue. And in fact, all of these measures have passed on party lines, with the majority party having a 1-seat majority in both houses and the governor. So it's not like it's an overwhelming majority. It's like a very slim majority with a very, who are very invested in this privatization narrative.
And I think politically speaking too, is just that the power of that area. I mean, when we look at the Maricopa County versus Pima County, so we see the tendencies right there, specifically when it comes to political and also to the election of state representatives, as well as the U.S. Congress and Senate. So you see the shift that needs to happen. Obviously, we see the shift that needs to happen. And I think that's exactly one of the because Pima County and some other areas tend to be more pro-public school, whereas when you go into Pima, and obviously there are some factions of here in Pima County, especially in the business community, that are more into private/religious schools. And that, I think, is sometimes really the total war that we have to be able to do that. Because again, everyone's the best for the child, right? The children, as far as public education. And I think that's what happens sometimes, that the conversation goes, well, I'm going to decide. So the conversation that they have effectively accomplished with the UOP is a message. This is a choice. As a parent, I have the choice to do the best for my kid. And you cannot beat that, no matter what data and whatever you have to do. I think you have to come up with different ways of communicating, and also stick to a communication strategy message that is going to also resonate those individuals. Because again, there are so many things, and unfortunately, you can see on the link that you sent about this turning point, it's a business. Sorry, but that's a business.
It's a business.
It's free enterprise. It's like, well, dude, this is education, but I mean, that's the message, and it has been a business. So I think that's something that we just have to be able to really create a message for those who are really concerned about the future, I mean, I have a almost 2-year-old granddaughter lives here in Tucson. So I'm worried about her educational future too as well.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm here to.
That's a great point, that the school choice narrative sounds really good. I want the best for my kid. I should be able to make that choice. And our side of it is more complex. We have to counter that and explain why that is a misleading term. So I'm really impressed with Save Our Schools. Their messaging really focuses on neighborhood schools. We want strong neighborhood schools. That's what 95% of Arizona families choose. And it's just a matter of getting that message out there, which is what we're going to talk about next. But first, there's a great point in the chat from Teresa again, that the school grading system, that A-rated to F-rated school system, highly correlates to the socioeconomic status of these families. If the higher socioeconomic schools are receiving lots of tax credits, they can offer more programs, they have more staff, they have, they can fix their buildings. Actually, that's not true, because the tax credits go to only specific things. But schools with decreased funding lose their higher ratings. It makes lots of sense. So again, going back to that, we have the most unequal funding model in the nation. So what can we do? Here we go. I highly recommend following Save Our Schools on social media and sharing their posts. We want to amplify the information that they're putting out. All of these news articles I have gotten from their social media posts. So if you want to stay up to date on media that's coming out about the issue, that's a great way. They also often post about signing events. They do a lot of webinars and cool panels with lawmakers. Good stuff. As Miguel was saying, it's super important to talk with friends and family about the issue. It can feel awkward to bring this up in a social setting, but that's the #1 most effective way to sow the seeds for grassroots organizing, because you're a trusted messenger. And you don't have to have all the facts. You can garble the facts if you want, because the point is our taxpayer money is going to private schools, and that's not right. That's all you really need to say. So the petition campaign that's happening right now, if we can get the necessary number of signatures, we can block implementation of the voucher expansion, and it will be referred to the 2024 ballot for voters to again reject, as they did in 2018. We need 118,823 valid signatures by September 24th. But really, we're shooting for 200,000 because we know that they're going to throw out as many signatures as they can on technicalities. So we need a buffer. So about 200,000 signatures by September 24th, which is 90 days after the end of the legislative session, is why that deadline. So this is massive. Like I said, this is the 4th summer in 4 years that we've gathered signatures in the summer in a last 2 years in a pandemic, and teachers are heading back to school and they are tired of fighting these fights. And so we need, those of us who aren't in the classroom, we really need to do what we can to help this campaign. So Literacy Connects is your one-stop petition shop. You can come in to the front desk. You can sign the petition here. We also have pages that you can check out on your own. Our front desk staff knows how to train you in what you need to do to gather petitions. We also have information pages that you can take about all the do's and don'ts of signature gathering. We have right here. Does my cord stretch? Let me show you all the things we have. I just snagged a bunch to take home because I've been going through mine like crazy. Okay, I'm gonna undo my blurring so you can see these. So one of the things you can pick up is this fact sheet that has talking points. It's like an FAQ. It's available in English and in Spanish. There is the circulator guide with all the instructions about do's and don'ts. There's a very nice sign. If you're thinking of going out to gather signatures in public, we have a nice sign you can put on your table or on a wall behind you. And there are also little palm cards that you can pick up to, if people say, oh, I'm not ready to sign, I want more information, give them a palm card. It has the information about where they can go to sign, which I can show you right here. So the go-to website is teamsosarizona.com. And actually, I will put that in the chat for you too. That's where everything is. So I haven't had those palm cards with me when I've been out gathering signatures. So I write this website on a Post-it note for people. And on this website, we have a nice description of the issue. Are you seeing the website? Okay. This is where all of the information and materials are. There's also a video training for how to gather signatures. And if Literacy Connects is not a convenient place for you to pick up your petition pages, you can get them at any of these spots. So these spots are all places where you can pick up pages or you can sign the petition. So, oh my gosh. So you can see there's several spots in Tucson. You can find whatever is most convenient for you. Okay. Another great thing that I recommend you do is if you go back to the web page here, you can sign up to volunteer. And this is, you can also, you can just pick up your pages and petition, get signatures. But if you're interested in being more connected with Save Our Schools, you can sign up here. This will also get you connected with the Southern Arizona Community Action Team. There is a Save Our Schools staff person here in Tucson who coordinates tons of signing events throughout the week and can help you with any materials, any questions you have, and she's bilingual. So she's bilingual with English, Spanish. So if you need Spanish language resources, she can help. And one more thing. When you join the Southern Arizona Community Action Team, you have access to this cool page where people sign up to volunteer. So she puts the place in the shift in there, and then you can find a buddy, recruit a buddy, and you can sign up together to go. These are all sites that have worked really well for us in the past, which is why we've put them on the webpage. But if you've got a spot where you know you want to go, then that works too. Okay, that was a lot. Fire hose. Questions? Concerns or things that you're nervous about or excited about?
When you've been out talking to people about this already, are you getting a lot of questions from the people you're talking to, or like
oh my gosh,
what is the most thing you've been asked?
Great question. So in the past 3 summers we've been out gathering signatures, it's always kind of tough to explain the issue, especially last summer when we had 3, we were trying to refer to the ballot. It was so hard. The 2 times I've been out in public getting signatures, people have been like, oh, is that the vouchers thing? Let me sign. Like, people are so informed about it. I don't know how this has happened, if it's because of the media coverage or what, but people are like, let me add it. And then when I, in conversations with folks who haven't heard of it, people are super supportive. They're like, no, this is, I think a lot of people are angry about the absolute disregard for the will of the voters. We voted on it in 2018. Why have they brought it back? People have been super receptive, super receptive.
I have a question, Kate.
Yeah.
Do we have a plan yet for Literacy Connects as far as when we want people to return their signed petitions?
Great question. So we want full petition pages in as soon as possible, because that helps Save Our Schools know where they're at number wise. So when you have when you're finished with your page, it doesn't have to be a full page. You can turn it in with 2 signatures on it. Doesn't matter. It needs to be notarized. One of the main instructions on the how-to page is don't write anything on the back of that first page, because that's where it's going to be notarized. Rhiannon, who's here today, is our notary at Literacy Connects, and she is available to notarize your pages Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 4. There she is. Hey, Rhiannon.
Mm.
And then you can, once Rhiannon notarizes them, you can leave them here with us, and I can get them to Christina, who's the Save Our Schools staff person. So turn them in as soon as you can, because we want Save Our Schools to have that data. Teresa, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention one more thing, that if we vote up and down the ballot, I know we're not supposed to be talking about candidates, so I won't be doing that. But when you vote up and down the ballot, make sure you vote for every single office in Arizona State. And even if it's, I'm just making this up, the corporation commissioner, find out what their views are on education, because they mingle with the lawmakers. And if we had lawmakers at the state level that valued education and worked for equally fairly funding public education, we wouldn't have to do all of this legwork. So I'm not saying don't do the legwork. Please help us collect signatures and, be pro-education, but make sure you and your friends vote up and down the ballot only pro-education candidates.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I'm going to pull up a resource here. The normal Save Our Schools page is sosarizona.org, and there's a tab there. Put it in the chat. There's a tab there that says Vote for Public Ed. This is where, and again, it's nonpartisan. It's based on if they're incumbents, it's based on their voting records. If they're new, it's based on their public statements of public school proud candidates. So, and it includes races all up and down the ballot. You just search for your jurisdiction. And this is a really great place. Primaries have passed, but coming up in November, it is essential that we elect a majority of lawmakers who support public education, regardless of party. I'm at this point, I'm not a single issue voter, but I look very carefully at all candidates' positions on public education, because we can do, like Teresa said, we do all of this legwork every summer. We push so hard, and we're always just, thank you, Tara, you got the direct link. We're always just trying to clean up the mess that's been created by the legislature. And that's not effective in the long term. And so to be proactive, we really need to change the composition of the state legislature so that it is a majority of people who support public education.
I want to make a comment.
Please.
Early in my career, I taught in public school, but most of my life I've spent with multinational corporations. And I have to say that equity is really important, and that's what we're talking about. But for those who want to look at it through a business view, we keep talking about that we want an educated workforce. We are not going to get an educated workforce in this manner. We're going to get a very skewed group of people. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to pay for a certain type of education can get it. The other people will be left out. In the long run, we will reap what we have sown. So it's not just an equity issue, it's an economics issue also.
Absolutely. Great point. We need an educated workforce. I mean, we need our next generation of people contributing to the economy.
Yes, and I think, and sorry, just to add, probably it would be beneficial, and I don't know in terms of reach, but also, talking to the different chambers of commerce, and since I've been involved in a lot of them, I know I can see sometimes where they lean towards. However, I think we need to, if that's the workforce development and the educated workforce, there is a whole initiative right now with the Metro Chamber that talks about workforce development and the blueprint, in which Pima Community College, U of A, and some other people are 100% involved. But that again, at this secondary, post-secondary level, it's nothing. A kindergarten, grade school, things of that nature. So it's like, well, they're looking at the end without looking at the beginning. And I think that's something that we probably, as an advocate group, we have to want to start engaging with those organizations as well. I'll be more than happy to help.
Great.
In any case. So
that's a great point. Mary Nell, you made me think of an important point, which is that we are not against private schools. You want to pay to send your kid to a private school? Great, that's your prerogative. Using my tax money to send your kid to private school is not okay with me. That's where it becomes really problematic for me. Tara.
Kind of to Mary and Miguel's comment, I was in Greater Tucson Leadership last year, and we had Economic Development Day, and they brought in 3 CEOs. One was the CEO of Mr. Car Wash, and then one was a tech company, and the other was Pack Dash, which is a newer company. And we asked them, what brought you to Arizona, Tucson specifically, and what are the challenges? And all of them were unanimous in saying that when they're recruiting and trying to bring work staff in and find work staff and people to fill positions, some families choose not to come here because of the public education rating. And I thought that was a really interesting point for people who are focused on, that more business perspective. So. And we had a question in the chat too from Elizabeth. Are studies available that demonstrate the business and tax-based payoffs from investing in public education?
I'm sure there are. Let me write that down.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll refer that to SOS.
And I just want to mention too, real quick, that the success and the efficacy of Pima Community College relies 100% on having students that can matriculate from the high schools in the county into the college. So enrollment at Pima College has gone down drastically every semester for the last maybe 20 semesters, 10 years. And, part of that reason might be that students don't feel that they have a future at a community college, because maybe when you talk about that ratio of counselors, 1 counselor to 906 students in the high schools, a student might not realize that there's a culinary department where they can learn how to be a chef, or an automotive department, or a computer-aided design department. They might not understand that about the college, especially if they didn't have any of those extracurriculars at their high school, which if they're underfunded, they most likely don't. So the success of all of our educational systems really relies on that every single kindergartner is going to have a great experience, and that positive experience continues throughout 12th grade.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just is so common sense. I know I'm in an echo chamber. Echo, 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 echo. So in the chat, Elizabeth also asks about incarceration rates and costs, the correlation to public education. I will look into that as well. Questions? Anything else? We have 3 minutes. Let's go to the chat. And no pressure, but if you feel comfortable, please type what action or actions you commit to take on this issue. Of course, Victoria is the fastest typer. Cool, great. Great, 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 great. Okay, wow, cool. Okay, we've got collecting signatures, letter to the editor, collecting signatures, working on communication strategies. Miguel, I saw that you put your email in the chat. Tara, would you be able to go back and grab that?
I did.
Great, thank you.
Also,
Mhm,
and I can do both English and Spanish, and then we can definitely
Great,
help and everything. So,
thank
yeah.
you. Sheila's shooting for at least 15 signatures. Linda's gonna sign. Lupita at the front desk, holding it down. Signatures from staff and visitors. Missy says 3 pages. Rhiannon, signatures, yard sign. Tara's gonna be part of the action team. Yes. Oh my gosh, Joelle, absolutely. If you work at organizations whose clients are impacted by this issue, please share this recording, share all of this information. A yard sign. There aren't actually yard signs that I know of. There are just these signs about you can sign right here. Great. Yes, absolutely. Ways to help that don't require in-person contact. Absolutely. Great. Miguel's coming by to get pages. Great. There are also a lot of ways that you can plug in on the public school proud candidates side of it. SOS is already running canvassing opportunities, door knocking opportunities, but they also have phone banking and text banking. So if you're not able to, for health reasons or whatever, if you're not able to get out and about, there are lots of things you can do from home. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It's noon on the dot. Thank you for all of your questions and comments and your commitment to take action. I am just really proud to be part of this grassroots movement. And, you know, we are working with hundreds of people statewide who have had enough of this total disregard for the will of the voters and this privatization push that is an unacceptable use of public funds. Great, thanks everybody. And again, we'll be sharing all of this via our newsletter and social media. Take care.